All right, folks, welcome back from lunch. 1 p.m. Thursday, February 6th, and we are here with our friends from the Office of Professional Regulation. And we are going to be going through a draft of the more technical correction oriented tune-up version of the OPR bill that is a tradition of this committee. And let's cut to the chase. Deputy Secretary of Council.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State, and I have with me
Jen Colon, General Counsel for OPR.
We're not going to go through a detailed overview of OPR because you had that previously, but it is part of our filed testimony, and I hope that you guys all have access to that. So we're just going to dive right into some of the statutory changes that we're recommending this committee makes.
Okay. And the first change that you're going to see is in 3 VSA 122. That's the statute that authorizes OPR's regulation of certain specified professions. And in there, you're going to see that we're amending to strike motor vehicle racing from that statute. OPR recently did a sunset report of the motor vehicle racing. I say profession, it's not really a profession like our other professions, but of motor vehicle racing, because we currently regulate racetracks. We're one of the only states in the country that have any kind of regulation over racetracks. We're the only state in the country that inspects racetracks. And essentially, what you would see if you took a look at our report is that we determined that OPR's regulation of racetracks hasn't yielded any enforcement action. There hasn't been a lot of public protection around that. So it seems like it's unnecessary regulation. So OPR's recommendation is that we deregulate. So we're wanting to strike motor vehicle racing from our authority. The next change that you'll see is in 123, 3 VSA 123. And that is a change related to the fee that we obtain for second chance determinations. So second chance determinations are determinations that somebody who's going to seek a license in the future from OPR, they can request that OPR take a look at their criminal history and let them know before they invest time and resources if that criminal history is going to be a bar to their licensure. So we charge a $25 fee for that second chance determination. But then if the person proceeds and gets a license from us later, we refund that fee. And so OPR would like to not refund that fee. Second chance determinations are very resource intensive. We have attorneys looking at that. So it's a way to just do some offset. It does, that $25 doesn't pay for the whole review, but it's a way to offset some of the cost of that. So we'd prefer to not refund that money. Also in 3 VSA 123, you'll see in section M that OPR would like to be exempt from the operation of 3 VSA 116 AB1. And that's a statute that allows the termination of state boards if there hasn't been any kind of legislative action within the last 5 years. The board can be essentially terminated. And so for OPR, we have, I think, 14 boards at this point. And that would be having to open up those chapters every 5 years to ensure that those boards aren't subject to that provision would be quite burdensome for the agency. I think we'd have to have more staff to make sure that we were doing legislative changes just kind of on a continual rotating basis. So we would ask to have that added language so that we're exempt from operation of that statute.
The next section is 3 VSA 125, that is OPR's fee sections. The first of our recommendations in this statutory section is to increase the license verification fee. It's currently $20 and we'd like to make it $30. Licensees obtain a verification from us for employment purposes or for to receive licensure in another state. And this information is available real time on our website, but what we're actually talking about is a printed certificate that's mailed from our office. So there is work that is done by our team to do this. And we would like to increase our fees there. And just as a backdrop, as you guys know, we talked about it a little bit in our OPR overview. A lot of these changes are driven in part because the Office of Professional Regulation is running at such a deficit that we wanted to increase fees where we could. You'll see a theme throughout this bill of things that we previously have not charged for, we would like to start charging for, and making little adjustments like this one to help increase our revenue stream. I will say that for the most part, we're not, aside from fixing fees that were dropped during the legislative session, we are not increasing any professionals' fees. But the next one that I wanted to talk about is A4V, which is peer support. It was supposed to increase from $50 to $75 when the original legislation was enacted, but that fee increase didn't make it into the statutory language last year. So that was, nobody's perfect. We always need to make little adjustments to work that we've done in the past. That is something that was dropped and was never intended to not be that way. Similarly, B4W reestablishes the fee for an electrology shop. There was a fee bill in 2023. There was a lot of fees moving around, and inadvertently, we never established a fee for an electrology shop. As a result, we have not charged electrology shops the last 2 cycles because we didn't have clear statutory authority of what that fee would be, except for the default advisor fee, which is $240. And without it expressly being part of that group, we felt concerned about doing that. So we are asking to put this fee back into the statute at $200.
Just real quick, how many electrology shop fees would that impact? Do you have any idea?
I believe that we have somewhere, it's under 50 electrology shops, but I can find out that.
50 is fine.
Yeah. And we have more electrologists than that, but electrology shops, I think it's under 50. The electrolyst is the person who's actually doing the procedure, like the human, and the electrology shop is the building.
Oh, okay, so like the business itself or the operation.
The business
license.
itself,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then
It's sort
you've
of
got
like
the
a barber
individuals.
shop and a barber.
It's the domicile.
And we do inspections of electrology shops, particularly now that there's some laser occurring within them. So those machines need to be inspected. But even without that, this is electrical current that's being submitted underneath the skin. And we do inspections of that.
Sounds fun.
It is not that fun, I can tell you from personal experience, but it is effective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there you go. So, and better than other alternatives. That's right. And that's enough on that topic.
Care to elaborate?
So there are some new fees that we are seeking to add to OPR. The first is we currently have apprenticeships that we offer in a wide variety of our professions. We've been really trying to expand apprenticeships as part of our work under the federal grant that we had previously, as a pathway for people who may not have the resources or time to go to college to get into an established profession. So, but we have not been charging a fee for that, and apprenticeships actually take more work than the traditional path because you're reviewing documentation of hours and verifying that there's an appropriate supervisor. And we think that apprenticeship pathways should be charged a fee as well. And the second is a license specialty. So a specialty is something that we put on top of a license that is, so classic one is Well, classic one is one that is part of a bill that's coming probably before this committee with optometry. So in that bill, the optometrists would have an optometry license, and then they would add a specialty, which requires additional education and training and verification from us. And that is called in the proposed bill, an advanced therapeutic procedures specialty. So there would be a fee for that work of adding, you hold your base license and then you add another specialty license on top. So we would like to charge a fee for that. It definitely adds work to our office to have these professionals operating at a higher scope of practice. It requires additional verification and qualifications checks, but it also adds enforcement costs as well. So we think it's appropriate that we are paid for that work. The next piece of B11 is something that we actually would like to shift our approach on. So when we gave draft language to this committee, we were proposing to add a fee for a data feed that was $1,500. This is a data feed that a lot of facilities and organizations are using. We've been offering it for free. And it's a draw on our system. The most classic example is UVM. They're drawing from our system data about all of our licensees who work within their facility every morning to verify that everybody who's working in their facilities has a license. This is a huge benefit to them because if somebody were to fail to renew or was disciplined and then went to work and they didn't know, then they would not be reimbursed by Medicaid, Medicare. So it's a compliance feature for them. And we have been providing it for free. And we had proposed a $1,500 fee, but we've been, since that bill drafting time, we've really been thinking about our approach and looking at how other states do it and analyzing the complexity of the variety of organizations that use our data feed. Some are huge institutions, some are small institutions, some are other sister regulatory institutions. And we would like to change our approach, which would be in 3 VSA 118, which is the authorization for the Secretary of State to collect money and revenue and which streams it goes into. We would like to have the authorization to charge for voluntary services. And that fee would be set at the Secretary of State level, because we think that there's a nuance that is not well met through statutory language. And so with this amendment, we would be able to establish at the Secretary of State level what our fees could and should be for a particular service.
Representative Pingo.
Voluntary services, other than this data feed type service, what other kinds of voluntary services would that cover at your office?
Currently, it is these data feeds.
Okay. There could be others if this statute were to be amended and you came up with some new technology in the future.
Exactly. And I anticipate, we're working on that language now. I anticipate that it'll be broadly written so that we can come back and talk about it with the legislature, but also be able to modify, if there's new technology. But it is data feeds. And we've done some analysis on the difference between mandatory fees, meaning you have to pay this fee to have the thing, a driver's license, a nurse license, versus something that people volunteer to stand up. And we've seen examples in our state, but also in other states where that voluntary service that someone signs up for, it is better set for a policy that can change and be modifiable.
Representative Oppenheim here.
Quick about the apprenticeship licenses fees, is that? Or says you want to add a fee for the apprentice?
Yeah.
You have an idea? what you're adding?
I believe
don't
it's
know.
$100.
Okay, because.
Oh, $50. $50, yeah.
Okay,
And the specialty is $100.
okay.
So I have a question about the apprentices also. That would be on the student apprentice versus the organization providing the apprenticeship
Correct.
opportunity.
The person who is seeking licensure through the apprenticeship path.
And would this apply to school apprenticeships, school-related apprenticeships?
No.
Okay, so only, how do you distinguish that?
Well, a school apprenticeship is not a pathway to licensure. The pathway to licensure with a school apprenticeship is graduation from the school. So this is really an alternative to going to school. And a classic example for this is barbers or cosmetologists. You don't have to go to barber and cosmetology school to become a barber or cosmetologist. You can train under a barber or cosmetologist for a certain number of hours, and a certain number of topics need to be covered. And then you can become a barber or an apprenticeship, a barber or a cosmetologist. And this $50 offsets the additional work that our office needs to do when they receive that application. That person who went through the apprenticeship path applies for a cosmetology license and pays the cosmetology license application. But what we're looking for is that $50 to compensate for our office's work of reviewing those hours, making sure that they fall within the right categories, and that this person is actually qualified. And it's much more labor intensive than receiving a degree certificate from a barber or cosmetology school. Yes. The next modification is to B12. This is something that the Office of Professional Regulation has never done before, and it is a disciplinary action surcharge. So right now, when somebody is found to have committed unprofessional conduct, the cost of that enforcement action is borne by the entire subgroup of licensees. And this is a way to mitigate that to an extent. In no way does it offset it. We're asking for a $250 fee, but the cost of enforcement per case, the way that we have it structured now, is well over $3,000 per case. So the cost of enforcement is expensive. The cost of making sure that licensees are qualified, and if they are not, that they are taken out of practice or that their practice is modified, is expensive. And we think that the person who has been found adjudicated to have committed unprofessional conduct should pay for part of the cost of enforcement. So a lot of other states have been doing this for a long time, and $250 actually is significantly lower than almost every other state that I've seen. Most states are charging anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000. But we think that this is a way to offset a little bit of our costs.
Representative Waters Evans.
How many times do you run into that
How many?
per year? Like where you're
Yeah.
paying that $3,000 for
Oh,
to
quite a bit. I can get you that statistic, but I think, we receive about 800 complaints a year. We investigate about 600 complaints a year.
Yep.
And then we prosecute about 150 to 200 complaints a year.
Okay.
And there's an investigation cost, and then there's a prosecution cost that is allocated across our professions and by the number of complaints in the profession. And the investigation cost is slightly higher than the prosecution cost. I don't have the specific numbers in mind, but if you look at, we just actually filed the interim OPR money study report, which this body asked us to do. And we are asking for more time to really make a recommendation on how OPR should be structured financially. But one of the things that is discussed is the cost of enforcement, first, the importance of enforcement, and then the cost of enforcement, and some ideas of how we might be more equitable. And this disciplinary action surcharge is one of the ideas that came up in that conversation, and one that we wanted to move up in this session.
that's a lot.
It's a very important, just because you asked and because I think we have a little bit of time, the work that our enforcement team does is critical to public protection. And the types of cases that our office receives are criminal in nature, are complicated, frequently involve complex review of medical documents, financial documents, major transactions, the buying and selling of houses. The criminal cases have a large impact on Vermonters. We have everything from diversion off of hospital floors to sexual misconduct to significant boundary violations to death resulting in a prison. So we have major investigations within the Office of Professional Regulation. And it's really important that we have a dedicated enforcement team that knows these professions, knows how to walk onto a hospital floor without causing major disruption, and is able to conduct our investigations in the most equitable way, the most efficient way, and that then if there is criminal activity, that we can pursue the administrative licensing case and the criminal case simultaneously.
Megan?
Do I remember correctly that OPR is sort of self-funded?
We are.
Yeah, so for new members, you may not know that OPR raises its own funds to pay for its own activities.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And then section C, which we're asking to strike, it prohibited us from requiring payment of renewal fees when a license lapses. We do not charge a renewal fee if the person has not been practicing. But if somebody has been practicing and they've been practicing for 3 years, 5 years without a license, that is an unprofessional conduct charge. And we do pursue action and we assess fines typically based on the renewal fees that they would have paid. So we did not want to cause any undermining of the way that we've been handling those cases with this statutory language that I think has been lingering there. So we're asking that that be struck. With that, I'm going to turn to Jen.
Thanks. You'll see in 3 VSA 127, there's a provision that we want to raise the potential penalty for unauthorized practice to $5,000. And that's just to make, that's an administrative actions. We can pursue unauthorized practice. That can be a criminal case, that can be pursued in superior court, and it can be pursued administratively. So there's a lot of different ways that can happen if someone's practicing a regulated profession in Vermont without a license. The fees throughout the rest of the statute are $5,000, but for whatever reason, when we pursue that administratively, the fee was lower. So we just wanted to raise that to $5,000 for consistency throughout the statute.
What is it currently?
I believe it's 2,500, but let me, yep, 2,500. And then the next statute, 3 VSA 129. This is language along the lines of what Lauren was talking about with the surcharge for unprofessional conduct violations that have been determined through an adjudication. In 3 VSA 129, we want to add language that just authorizes a board or the director to assess that surcharge. It's just to grant that authority. So we'd like to add that language.
Now we're transitioning to Title 26, which is where all of our professions live. And the first of our recommendations is with barbers and cosmetology. We were approached at the beginning of this session to add to 26 VSA 281, which provides the requirements for barber and cosmetology school, to add language that will be that would make it required that the school or an apprenticeship path, because with the apprenticeship pathway, you have to meet the requirements of the school around training and education for textured hair. As you may or may not know, we don't have that many barbers and cosmetologists in our state that are trained on how to cut non-white people's hair. And we would like that to be part of the education and training so that people do not have to travel to Burlington to learn to get their hair cut. And so this would be a way to grow that skill set in this profession.
So Megan?
Thank you. Just quickly, that wouldn't be a specialty onto cosmetology because, for instance, in certain parts of the state, they may not encounter the need for this.
It would not be a specialty. It would be built into the required training. And there's a lot of other things that are built into training that not all barbers and not all cosmetologists do. For instance, not all barbers provide hot shaves, but they're all trained on how to do it. Not all cosmetologists do keratin protein straightening treatments, but they're all required to learn about it. So there's other examples where there is training that an individual may choose to never do. But we would like to make clear in the law that this is a part of what is expected of a barber and cosmetologist. The next section is funeral services. Historically, there was something called escrow agents. To everybody's research and looking into this issue, we don't know the last time that there was an escrow agent that our office licensed. The reality is that funeral directors can be escrow agents, and there's lots of private venues for people to be escrow agents for funeral funds, prepayment of funeral funds. And so we would like to redact the language in Title 26 related to escrow agents. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks. And then the last change you're going to see is the repeal of Chapter 93 in Title 26, which is the motor vehicle racing chapter. And that's, again, for the reasons that we mentioned earlier and that are contained in our sunset report that we turned in here a couple weeks ago.
Okay. All right.
Does anyone have any questions for
Yeah, just
our
digest the
witnesses?
last piece. Representative Nugent.
Do you have a sense of what your spreadsheet will look like as far as like when these fees change, how much that will help fund OPR?
No is the direct answer, because we haven't ever charged, so we haven't been tracking how many, some things we can track and some things we can't. Like, we know how many license verifications we receive, and I could get that data for you, but we know that it will be a net help, but it is not going to solve our budget problem. We've never charged for unprofessional conduct cases, but I can tell you we do about 100, 150. So if you multiply that by 250, that will be our net there. We do anticipate that we'll have issues recouping that money. Just because we charge it doesn't mean we receive it. So, but it will make a difference. It will not solve the OPR budget crisis.
Any other hands? Thank you. This all seems very sticking to the truth and technical. So I appreciate the time. I do want to have a chat with you folks a little bit later about some of the other OPR relevant conversations that are coming in that are perceived to be a later lift. And whether or not there's a willingness to include some of those pieces in here as a vehicle, as long as they are some of the more, I'm going to use the word benign, conversations.
There's buckets, I understand.
There are levels of emotions on OPR, yes.
I do want to say thank you for making sure that like your website is an easy one to navigate. As we were talking about professional regulation, I had an anxiety attack because I was like, is mine up to date? And it's so easy to navigate. So thank you. It's really easy for professionals to see.
Like that.
Yeah.
There you go.
While we're on that subject, I think I sent you a note about license renewal for folks who take multiple courses.
Yes.
And that it was impossible to upload them all at once. They had to be done one by one.
Yes.
So I don't know if there's a way to make that easier, because if somebody crams it into the end of their calendar year when they're supposed to have 30 credits or
and they have to
whatever,
do 30.
and they want to do all 30 all at once, there's no easy way to do that.
We have talked about it. What that does is it transfers the work of looking through a bulk PDF to our team, as opposed, because it would come in as 30 pages of certificates and then someone would have to walk through each one. What happens now is that if somebody uploads something in a test that they've done 30, our staff actually doesn't review each certificate individually. They just look at the list and are like, okay, good, go. And we have talked about technical ways that we can do that, and it's on our roadmap. We have talked about it, but it's a development in our IT system that we just haven't done yet. So, but we understand the pain point. We've heard it before, and I apologize. I thought I had emailed you back, but I
That's
apparently
okay,
did not.
No worries, I just thought I'd bring it up while Rep Stone brought up hers.
She undoubtedly has to do continuing education, has experienced that pain.
Oh, yeah, that's why I thought I was about to experience that in real time, but I'm up to date to next year. So,
She just may be one of these people that does one per month and gets it all done in a timely fashion. Others maybe not so timely.
There's a whole
That's our
spectrum,
menu.
yes, much, yes. We don't all have to say which bucket we fall.
Right.
All right, well, thank you so much for the detail on
Yeah.
this, and we plan on taking this up rapidly, cramming the scope of work on some other things that are coming. We want to move this one later.
Thank
So
you.
we will definitely be in touch. Autumn, with that, take us off till 1:55 when we return for continued testimony with our friends from 3 Squares VT.